The night before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life turned into a waking nightmare, a revelation so horrifying it shattered every illusion I'd ever held about love, trust, and the woman I thought I knew. Meline Bowmont wasn't just unfaithful, she was entangled in something far darker, far more insidious than I could have imagined. What started as a routine check of shared financial documents spiraled into uncovering an intricate web of deceit that stretched across continents. Offshore accounts, dozens of them hidden under layers of shell companies, each holding sums so staggering they made my stomach churn. Hundreds of millions of dollars funneled through shadowy networks, laundered and reinvested, all while she smiled at me across dinner tables, whispering promises of forever. It began with a single email buried deep within our shared business portal, one I stumbled upon by sheer accident. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, a transaction record, but as I dug deeper, the truth hit me like a freight train. These weren't just numbers on a screen, they were evidence of betrayal on a scale I couldn't comprehend. And then came the call from a former employee of Beaumont Enterprises, someone who had been silenced for too long. His voice trembled over the phone as he revealed secrets that sent chills down my spine. "They're not just criminals," he said, his words laced with fear. "They destroy anyone who gets in their way." He told me stories about executives blackmailed into compliance, whistleblowers silenced permanently, and deals brokered with blood money. Each revelation felt like another layer of my world crumbling beneath me. But the worst part, Meline wasn't just complicit. She was orchestrating it all behind the scenes. She saw me as nothing more than a pawn, a stepping stone to secure her family's empire, while secretly plotting to replace me with Dominic Walsh, her real endgame. Every laugh we shared, every tender moment, every dream we built together, it was all a lie, a performance crafted to keep me blind to her true intentions. By the time I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking, not from anger, but from the sheer magnitude of what I had uncovered. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore, it was war. The Beaumonts weren't just wealthy, they were untouchable, or so they thought. Their wealth wasn't inherited. It was stolen, manipulated, and laundered through generations of calculated crime. And now, I had the proof to bring them down. But as I stared at the damning evidence spread across my desk, I realized the stakes were higher than I'd anticipated. If I exposed them, there would be no going back. They would fight back, and they wouldn't play fair. Yet, as I sat there, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't let them win. The night before the wedding, as I sat in my penthouse apartment staring at the damning evidence spread across my desk, a sudden crash echoed through the room. My heart slammed against my chest as I turned toward the sound of shattered window, glass shards glittering like icy daggers on the floor. Before I could react, 3 shadowy figures burst into the room, their faces obscured by masks. They moved with calculated precision, not here to steal but to destroy. My blood ran cold when one of them pulled out a flash drive from his jacket, the same drive containing every piece of evidence I had gathered against Meline and her family. "Hand it over, Lucas," the leader growled, his voice low and menacing. "You don't want to make this personal." Personal, it already was. Every fiber of my being screamed that these weren't random thugs. They were professionals, hired by someone who knew exactly what I was planning. Someone close to Meline. I clenched my fists, adrenaline surging through me. The velvet box with the necklace still lay on my desk, untouched, but now wasn't the time for sentimentality. I lunged for the hidden safe behind a painting where I'd stashed backup copies of everything: documents, emails, transaction records, all encrypted and ready to be released if anything happened to me. They were faster than I expected. One of them grabbed me from behind while another swept the desk clear, sending papers fluttering like confetti. But I wasn't about to let them win. With a desperate twist, I broke free, grabbing a heavy crystal paperweight and hurling it at the nearest intruder. It connected with a sickening thud, and he stumbled back, clutching his face. That gave me just enough time to activate the emergency protocol on my laptop, a failsafe that would automatically send all the evidence to multiple news outlets and law enforcement agencies if I didn't deactivate it within 10 minutes. As chaos erupted around me, I realized how precarious my situation truly was. These men weren't playing games. If they got their hands on the evidence, Meline's empire would remain untouchable, and I'd be erased without a trace. Just as I thought I might actually lose, there was a sharp knock at the door. The attackers froze, exchanging wary glances. Whoever it was, they clearly hadn't anticipated reinforcements. Summoning every ounce of courage, I shouted, "Come in." To my astonishment, two men in dark suits entered, guns drawn. FBI badges gleamed on their belts. Lucas Harrington. One of them asked, his tone clipped and urgent. "We need to talk." Relief washed over me, but only briefly. Their presence meant one thing: this went deeper than I'd imagined. As they subdued the intruders, the agent who spoke earlier approached me. "Your investigation into Bowmont Enterprises caught our attention," he said quietly. "But you're poking a hornet's nest. Work with us, and we can take them down for good." I hesitated, staring at the carnage in my once pristine apartment. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice and survival. "What do you need?" I finally asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The cathedral was silent except for the faint rustle of silk and the clicking of cameras as Meline glided down the aisle, her gown shimmering like liquid moonlight under the stained glass windows. She smiled at me, that practiced, dazzling smile meant to reassure everyone, especially me, that she was mine, but I knew better. My hands were steady as I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out the cream-colored envelope that would shatter her world. The officiant began his opening remarks, but I cut him off with a calm yet commanding voice. "Before we proceed," I said, my tone slicing through the hushed anticipation like a blade, "I have something to share." Meline's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. A murmur rippled through the crowd as I unfolded the first document, a damning email from her to Dominic Walsh, detailing their plan to drain my assets once we were married. Gasps echoed around the room, and Meline stiffened beside me. Then chaos erupted. Gerard Bowmont, who had been standing proudly in the front row, suddenly clutched his chest, his face pale as ash. "Daddy!" Meline screamed, reaching toward him as he collapsed into his seat, wheezing for air. Security rushed forward, but before anyone could react further, the massive double doors burst open. Dominic Walsh strode in, his sharp suit contrasting with the panic spreading across the room. His eyes locked onto Meline, and without hesitation, he moved toward her. "We need to leave now," he hissed, grabbing her arm. But Meline hesitated, her gaze darting between Dominic and me, searching for an escape. It was then that Eleanor Bowmont, Meline's mother, stepped forward. Her usually composed demeanor cracked as she approached me, desperation etched into every line of her face. "Lucas," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. "Name your price. Whatever you want, money, shares, anything. Just stop this now." Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation and privilege, as if wealth could still buy silence, could still erase the truth. I stared at her, feeling nothing but contempt. "It's too late for that," I replied, my voice cold and final. Behind me, reporters I had tipped off were already snapping photos, capturing every moment of the unraveling Bowmont empire. Dominic tugged harder on Meline's arm, trying to pull her away, but she resisted, her carefully constructed facade crumbling with each passing second. Guests murmured in shock, some clutching their pearls, others whispering furiously into their phones. Gerard, now partially recovered thanks to medical assistance, looked up at me with a mixture of fury and betrayal. "You think this is over?" he spat, his voice weak but venomous. "You've made a grave mistake, boy." I met his gaze, and flinching. "No, Mr. Bowmont," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like ice. "The only mistake here was yours for thinking you could control everything." As paramedics helped Gerard to his feet, Dominic finally managed to drag Meline toward the exit, but not before she turned back to me, her eyes wide with fear and rage. "You'll regret this, Lucas," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the commotion. But I didn't flinch. I simply watched as they disappeared through the doors, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Reporters swarmed the cathedral steps, their flashes illuminating the darkening sky. The Beaumont name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now tainted beyond repair. And I stood there, calm and resolute, knowing that justice not revenge had been served. The days following the wedding implosion were supposed to bring a sense of closure, but instead, they ushered in a storm darker than I had anticipated. The Bowmont name, once synonymous with power and invincibility, became a target painted across every shadowy corner of the city. As their empire crumbled under the weight of scandal, those who had once groveled at Gerard's feet turned into vultures circling for revenge or blood. Rumors began to surface that former business partners, furious over lost investments and ruined deals, were threatening the Bowmonts' lives. It wasn't just idle talk. These were men who operated outside the law, men who didn't care about consequences as long as they could reclaim what they believed was theirs. And then there was me, the man who had pulled the trigger on the whole catastrophe. If the Bowmonts were drowning, I was the one holding the anchor. My phone buzzed incessantly with anonymous texts, each more menacing than the last. "You think you're safe," one read, its brevity chilling. Another came through as a grainy photo of my car parked outside my penthouse, the license plate circled in red. They weren't just watching, they were sending a message: no one crosses the Bowmonts without paying a price. But the threats didn't stop at words. One evening, as I left a late meeting with my legal team, two figures emerged from the shadows near my car. Before I could react, a sharp pain exploded across my ribs, a steel pipe swung with brutal precision. I stumbled back, adrenaline surging as I caught sight of their faces, obscured by hoods. "This is your first warning," one growled before disappearing into the night. Blood pounded in my ears as I leaned against the cold brick wall, clutching my side. For the first time since exposing Meline, fear crept in, not for myself, but for the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. By morning, my penthouse resembled a fortress. Security teams rotated shifts around the clock, cameras monitored every angle, and encrypted communication devices replaced my regular phone. Yet even with armed guards stationed outside my door, paranoia lingered like a second skin. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of movement in the hallway, felt like a prelude to another attack. The Bowmonts may have fallen, but their allies, those untethered beasts of the underworld, were far from defeated, and they wanted me to know it. Yet amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. I found clarity. These attacks weren't just attempts to silence me. They were reminders of why I had done this in the first place. Meline and her family thrived on fear, manipulation, and control. To let them win even posthumously would mean surrendering to the very darkness I sought to destroy. So I stood firm, bolstered by the knowledge that every blow aimed at me only reinforced the truth: justice, though costly, was worth fighting for. Rebuilding my life after the wedding fiasco felt like trying to piece together shards of a shattered mirror, each fragment reflecting not clarity but distorted images of who I used to be. The public fallout had been explosive, and while some hailed me as a whistleblower taking down corruption, others saw only a man driven by vengeance. My business, once thriving under the Bowmont shadow, became tainted by association. Investors whispered behind closed doors, questioning whether my motives were noble or simply vindictive. Was I truly exposing wrongdoing, or was this just another power play? Every meeting felt like walking into an ambush. Every handshake carried the weight of suspicion. The nights were worse. Sleep, when it came at all, was haunted by visions of Meline's face, her smile twisting into something sinister, her laughter echoing in dark corridors that seemed endless. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced she was standing over me, whispering accusations. "You ruin everything," she'd hiss in those dreams, her voice cold enough to freeze blood. These weren't mere nightmares, they were echoes of reality, reminders of what I had lost and gained in one cataclysmic act. My therapist called it PTSD, but labels didn't dull the edges of pain. They couldn't silence the voices inside my head telling me I'd gone too far. And then there were the people I thought would stand by me, the friends, colleagues, even family members who had cheered for my success. One by one, they distanced themselves, their loyalty crumbling under societal pressure. "You could have handled it differently," said Richard, a close friend since college, during our final argument. His words stung because they mirrored what I feared most, that I had crossed a line no one else dared approach. Even my sister, Claire, hesitated before inviting me to Sunday dinners anymore, her eyes darting nervously whenever the conversation veered toward the scandal. "People don't understand," she murmured once, more to herself than to me. But understanding wasn't the issue, it was judgment. Judgment from those who hadn't lived through the betrayal, who hadn't seen the evidence pile up until it suffocated any chance of reconciliation. Professionally, rebuilding proved harder than anticipated. Clients canceled contracts without explanation, leaving my company teetering on the brink of collapse. Rumors spread faster than facts. Lucas Harrington is unstable. He destroyed a woman's life for revenge. No one wanted to risk associating with someone so controversial. Yet, amidst the chaos, I found solace in small victories: a new client willing to take a chance, a former colleague sending quiet encouragement, a stranger praising my courage online. Each glimmer of hope reminded me why I'd done this in the first place, not for revenge, but for justice. Still, the road ahead stretched long and treacherous, littered with obstacles I hadn't foreseen. When Serena Caldwell first walked into my office, I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't like the others, no polished smile, no rehearsed charm. Her sharp gaze scanned the room as if she were assessing every detail, every potential threat. "Mr. Harrington," she began, her tone professional but guarded, "I need to be honest. Your reputation precedes you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken judgment. It wasn't just about what had happened with Meline. It was everything: the scandal, the headlines, the whispers that still followed me wherever I went. "I'm not here for drama," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "I need someone who can help clean up the mess left behind. Someone trustworthy." Serena's lips pressed into a thin line. "And you think I'm that person?" she asked, skepticism dripping from her voice. For a moment, I didn't answer. Instead, I watched her, really watched her. There was something different about her, something real, but she wasn't convinced yet. "I'll consider it," she said finally, gathering her things. As she turned to leave, I called after her, "You won't find anyone more committed to doing this right." She paused at the door, glancing over her shoulder. "We'll see." Her reluctance wasn't surprising. The world had painted me as a man consumed by revenge, and Serena wasn't one to jump blindly into anything. What I didn't expect, however, was the resistance from her family. When she eventually agreed to take on the project, they were furious. "He's dangerous, Serena," her father shouted during one of their heated arguments. "That man destroyed an entire family. What makes you think he won't do the same to you?" Her mother chimed in, tears in her eyes. "You're too good for this, sweetheart. Don't let him drag you down." But Serena wasn't swayed. "He's trying to rebuild," she told them firmly. "And if I can help him do that, then maybe there's hope for both of us." Still, their warnings lingered in the back of my mind. Was I putting her in danger? The thought gnawed at me, especially when the threats started again. Late one evening, as Serena left the office, a black SUV pulled up beside her. Two men jumped out, grabbing her before she could react. Panic surged through me when I received her text to help. "They've got me." Adrenaline took over. I raced through the city streets, tracking her phone's location until I found the abandoned warehouse where they'd taken her. My heart pounded as I burst through the door, finding her tied to a chair, her calm demeanor masking the fear in her eyes. "Let her go," I demanded, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. The leader sneered, stepping closer. "You ruined us, Harrington. Now it's your turn to lose something precious." Before he could move, security teams I had stationed nearby stormed in, overpowering them. As I untied Serena, she looked at me, her voice trembling but resolute. "You came for me." The journey to our happiness wasn't a smooth one, far from it. Serena and I had fought hard to build something real, something untainted by the shadows of my past. But just when we thought we were safe, just when I believed Meline Bowmont's influence was finally behind us, her lingering specter struck again. It happened on the morning of our wedding, a day that was supposed to mark the beginning of our forever. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, but beneath the beauty lay an ominous calm. As I stood at the altar, waiting for Serena to walk down the aisle, I noticed subtle signs that something was off. A few unfamiliar faces lingered near the back of the venue, their postures tense, their eyes scanning the crowd with predatory intent. My security team exchanged uneasy glances, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Before I could act, chaos erupted. Men dressed in black stormed the ceremony, shouting orders and brandishing weapons. Panic spread like wildfire as guests screamed and scattered. Through the commotion, I caught sight of Serena, her white gown billowing as she was dragged away by the masked figures. "Serena," I shouted, lunging forward, but strong arms held me back. One of the intruders stepped into view, his voice dripping with malice. "This is for Meline," he spat before disappearing with her. My blood ran cold, but I refused to let fear paralyze me. With every ounce of determination, I broke free and pursued them, my heart pounding like a war drum. They couldn't take her from me, not now, not ever. Thanks to the quick thinking of my security detail, who managed to track the kidnapper's vehicle through GPS signals, we located their hideout within hours. What followed was a tense standoff outside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Gunshots echoed in the distance as law enforcement arrived, surrounding the building. I didn't wait for backup, I charged inside, driven by desperation and love. Inside, I found Serena bound but unharmed, her fierce gaze meeting mine despite her predicament. "You're late," she quipped, trying to mask her fear with humor. I couldn't help but laugh, even as adrenaline coursed through my veins. Together, we escaped the chaos, emerging into the light hand in hand, but the ordeal wasn't over. The attack made it clear remnants of the Bowmont Empire still existed, and they weren't going to let me move on without a fight. For Serena's safety and our future, we decided to leave everything behind. We relocated to a new city, far from the reach of those who sought revenge. In this fresh start, we built a life rooted in trust and authenticity. Our second attempt at a wedding was intimate, held under a canopy of stars with only close friends and family present. This time, nothing interrupted our vows. As Serena slid the ring onto my finger, her touch steady and sure, I knew this was where I belonged. No more running, no more hiding, just love, pure and true. The scars of betrayal run deep, but they don't have to define you. That's what I learned after everything, after Meline, after the wedding that never was, and after the years spent rebuilding myself from the ashes she left behind. Love isn't a battlefield where one emerges victorious while the other lies defeated. It's not about control or power or who holds the reins tighter. Real love doesn't demand sacrifices that hollow you out, it fills you up instead. And standing there at my second wedding, this time with Serena by my side, I finally understood the difference. Meline had taught me what love isn't: manipulative, transactional, destructive. She turned affection into a weapon, trust into leverage, and promises into traps. For years, I carried the weight of her betrayal like an invisible chain wrapped around my chest, suffocating me every time I dared to let someone new in. But Serena, she didn't try to break those chains, she simply showed me how to unlock them myself. Her presence wasn't about fixing me, it was about reminding me that healing wasn't something I had to do alone. "You're allowed to be happy," she once told me during one of our late-night talks, her voice soft but firm. At the time, I didn't believe her. How could I, when happiness felt like a foreign concept, something reserved for people who hadn't been shattered? But Serena persisted, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through quiet moments of authenticity. When I doubted myself, she reminded me of my strength. When I hesitated to trust, she gave me no reason not to. Slowly, painfully, I began to realize that the past didn't own me anymore. The man Meline tried to destroy, the pawn in her game of greed and deceit, was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, someone capable of giving and receiving love without fear. That's the lesson I'll carry forever. True freedom doesn't come from revenge, it comes from letting go. Meline thought she could bury me under her schemes, but in the end, she only buried herself. As for me, I walked away not just from her, but from the version of myself that believed her lies. With Serena, I found more than redemption, I found peace. A love built on mutual respect, honesty, and partnership, a stark contrast to the toxic illusion Meline sold me. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and sometimes, real is enough.